to this I think we call it a fireside chat. But I want to welcome all those who are attending this webinar today. We're going to be having a fantastic webinar, a book launch. We're going to be having a fantastic book launch today of a book that is extremely scathing, but extremely fair in its analysis around the ruling party that is currently in power. And we know there's many, the ANC has gone through many trials and tribulations over the years, and has had many downfalls and has made many, many mistakes. But I think a book like this is extremely necessary to ensure that we keep a critical eye. So I welcome all of you to the Wits School of Governance book launch of The Great Pretenders, Race and Class Under the ANC Rule by Dr. Ebrahim Harvey. My job is very, very easy. It is just to introduce the speaker so I can also sit down, close my camera and have a bit of popcorn as I listen to the conversation go off. So we have our two speakers, obviously our author, but our facilitator today is Dr. Trevor Ngwane. Dr. Ngwane is a scholar activist who works in academic and political spheres. He obtained his PhD at the University of Johannesburg in 2017 after 2 decades of political activism in various social movements and political organizations. In 2021, he was appointed as director of the Center of Sociological Research and Practice at the University of Johannesburg. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Ngwane. And as our esteemed guest, the author of the day, we have Dr. Ebrahim Harvey. Dr. Harvey is a political writer and former columnist for the Mail and Guardian. He's been a regular contributor to the country's leading newspaper since 1999. He has a master's in public development management and a PhD in sociology from our own esteemed university, the University of Wits. He has also been a political activist for all his adult life and was at one time a trade unionist for COSATU. So I want to welcome you both. I am very, very excited for the conversation that's about to go ahead. And I want to welcome all of those who are in attendance today to say welcome to the School of Governance. And I hope you have a very good time. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, Ebrahim.
Good afternoon.
Welcome to the Wits School of Business book launch. Yes,
Thank you.
where on the spotlight is Dr. Ebrahim Harvey's latest book, titled The Great Pretenders, Race and Class Under ANC Rule. So I'd like to thank the head of school, Professor Mzugisi Kobo, the organizers, Lerato and her team. In particular, I'd like to thank all of you for taking time to attend. Indeed, I think we're going to have a terrific time. Welcome also to our audience on Facebook. It's great to have you in attendance in this fireside chat with the author. So I'll have a to and fro with Ebrahim for about 30 to 40 minutes, and then we'll open it up for audience participation. So please write your questions using the Q&A function. If you've got comments, you can write them in the chat box. For the Facebook audience, please write your questions in the comment section of Facebook. I'll read them out. So please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be shared on the Wits School of Governance YouTube channel. So, are you ready, Ebrahim?
I am.
Let's go. Let's get going then. So I thought maybe I should just ask you to tell us a bit about yourself, you know, where you grew up. I remember visiting you in your father's flat in Westbury Township many years ago. I think you used to hang out with the great poet Don Matera. You know, who is Ebrahim Harvey? And, you know, Westbury's so-called colored township, you know, how is it being colored there? Over to you, Ebrahim.
Yes, Trevor, no, I spent many years in Coronationville, but I'm actually born in a place, the first white miners town is called Jeppe. That is where I was born, and then we moved to Coronationville, Westbury, Western, those areas, you know. But yeah, no, it's I think I think probably those influences, you know, of that living in that area, I mean, came through in why I thought this colored Khoisan stroke question was so important. But very tough, grueling neighborhood we grew up in, you know. Terrible. I mean, those were the days of the fast guns, the Spaldings, and, you know, I mean, many people on their way to school, I attended the Coronation High School, were attacked, knifed, and stuff. Teachers were even sometimes knifed and threatened by the gangsters, you know. So, yeah, no, Don Matera is actually the person who I hold in very high esteem. Partly, I have differences with him politically, but it's he who introduced me to politics. My world revolved around soccer, Trevor. I was soccer until Don introduced me to, he was then with the Labour Party, you know, he then left the Labour Party and he joined the Black Consciousness Movement. So it was in between the transition from the Labour Party to the Black Consciousness Movement that Don spoke to me and had a very defining influence on me. And I never looked back after that, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, that's very interesting. So, you know, the title of your book,
Yes.
Ebrahim, The Great Pretenders, you know, I even thought of that song by
Yes.
Freddie Mercury. Oh, I'm a great pretender.
Yes.
So can you just tell us why you chose this title? You know,
yeah.
it's amazing.
I must tell you, in fact, let me tell you, I indicate, you know, I've been doing a whole string of radio, TV interviews. I mean, on Monday night, I had an hour interview at 702 Cape Radio. But this is how this title came about. Interesting. Maggie was one of the directors of Chikane. You know, we were struggling about what would be the title of this book. And, you know, she made the suggestion and Bridget then told me, and I said, no, man, this thing is not going to work. It took me 2 weeks. I asked Colin Bundy in London. I checked with a lot of people what they thought. It seemed most of them said, this is a beautiful title, and I was in disagreement. But I'm telling you, after 2 weeks of discussions with people to and fro, I began to see the brilliance, in fact, of the title. And why do I say the brilliance? Because indeed the book throughout is about this thing, captured best, I suppose, by the Great Pretenders. What the ANC had promised, Trevor, you know, from 1912, its inception, and especially from the 1950s, when it becomes more of a growing mass movement, you know, the UDF is formed in 1983, the Freedom Charter. So look at all these things that the ANC had promised, you know, even if you want to talk of its mantra, and it's a racialist and arguably a racist mantra of blacks in general and Africans in particular, even if you take that mantra at its word, look at what has happened to the African masses, Trevor. Forget for the moment about the so-called minorities, especially colors and Indians were organically a part of the broader Black working class for a long, long time. Look at what has happened. So, I mean, the townships are in an unprecedented mess right now. I've been involved from 1972, we were joined SASM. My first public meeting, and I'll give you the reason why I'm going to this background, was at the YMCA in Orlando East. Late Trevor, Leonard Martin and I joined SASM, and our first meeting was in Orlando East. We know the townships, that I can tell you. I then worked in the trade unions. I moved in and out of the townships. The townships today, listen to me, and there's nobody who dare contradict me, are in an unspeakable crisis. You cannot believe what's going on in the townships right now. Under what? Under ANC rule. There's many ways to address this thing. You cannot even begin to compare what the Nationalist Party did for the Afrikaner working class, Trevor. The Afrikaner working class enjoyed amongst the highest standards of municipal services in the world. Look at how long people waited for this day of Uhuru 1994, and go and look at what has happened in the townships. You can't believe it, you know. I mean, it's unspeakable crimes, really, I'll tell you, committed by the ANC. And so therefore, the aptness and appropriateness of the title, The Great Pretenders, and look what the Great Pretenders, what they've delivered to this country. Trevor, I said it in numerous places, we hardly speak. And you'll see in the book, I'm very strong on the continued saliency and relevancy of what is called white monopoly capital. But who talks about it? It's been pushed to the periphery of the national situation by the depth of corruption, incompetence, and the problems and crises that's besetting the ANC today.
Yeah. Look, I know with electricity, I know some communities in Soweto, Orange Farm, people living for 9 months without any electricity. It's terrible. So, Ebrahim, what was your main purpose then in writing this book, you know, besides the indignation, you know, and do you think from a personal point of view, you've achieved that purpose?
No, Trevor, this book was long in the making. I've been reading up and studying these from the 1970s already. In fact, I had thought about it even before the Kgalema Motlanthe biography, to be honest. But it's probably while studying and researching for his biography that I began to see the importance of sketching a broader historical, you know, perspective of what has happened, you know, in this country. And, you know, the title of the book speaks to the ongoing till today in post-apartheid South Africa in so many ways. In fact, there you look at the townships. What do you think is going on in the townships? In the townships is reinforcing, despite a purported non-racial democracy and one of the best constitutions in the world, etc., the township explosions and the unstoppable protests we've had from June 2004 speaks and re-emphasizes the ongoing salience of race, but only in relation to the questions of class and gender. Within this decaying neoliberal capitalist framework, which the ANC, you know, pursued from the inception, Trevor. You can look at the municipal legislation 2-3 months after 1994 elections. You go and look at the Water Services Act. Go and look at the 2000 Municipal Systems Act, which commercialized, corporatized, and commodified basic services. That is where you got Joburg Water, City Power, all these arm's length utilities, one foot in the public sector. The ANC is directly responsible for the chaos and the crisis in the townships. The ANC is even responsible for what has happened in Nkandla over this past weekend. I can talk at length in ways which connect the fiasco in Nkandla with the politics. The ANC produced Zuma. The ANC elected Zuma even after Mbeki fired him. In 2005, Mbeki fires him because of the Judge Hilary Squire's judgment, which pointed to a general corrupt relationship between Zuma and Shabir Sheikh. Who can believe it? They went to still elect this man, you know, in 2007 at Polokwane. And Trevor, it's in the book. Why would it happen? Why would the ANC be returned to power despite this total mess in this country? Because the let me be very specific now, without apology whatsoever. Because the African masses, who are the overwhelming majority of the population in this country, Trevor, the level of consciousness, the level of understanding even of their own conditions and what are the causal factors, in particular the ANC's policies, is abysmally poor. And that's the reason why they continue to return the ANC to power. They go to the elective conferences and they go and elect a person like Zuma, and you can see what happened after he came to office in 2009. It's been a mess, Trevor. You go from there to Nkandla, to his influence and the corruption in the SOEs, the Guptas, his links there. An unmitigated disaster has the Zuma presidency been. And then you've got the backdrop of, as I said, Mbeki firing him, and the ANC still elected him in 2010 at the Polokwane conference. I mean, it's...
Yeah, I know. Look, the book is I mean, you speak straight and you speak true, and clearly you fear no one, you fear no concept. So it's amazing. But, you have to give as much as you take. So I want to take you up on this thing of saying, the African masses, somewhere you say they are illiterate or they were victims of bad education. But just hold that thought, because I want you to answer that one.
Yes.
Because I want to ask you, is it the same people who were fighting in the struggle, But someone might say, but you, Ebrahim Harvey, you wrote that book on Kgalema Motlanthe, and in that book you were praising him. So how, is it consistent that you're so harsh on Zuma or even on the ANC when one of their key leaders, Motlanthe, who actually served as president of the country, and actually when Mbeki was taken down, he in a way saved the day because he came in and served and managed to stabilize the situation. So how would you answer that criticism, Ebrahim?
It's fairly easy to answer you, Trevor Ngwane, very easy, in fact, simply because you must remember that, Kgalema Motlanthe is a very different man with all his weaknesses and failings from Zuma. Very different. I think probably he's schooling the Anglican Church. The man was going to be a priest, etc. I mean, I've spent over 200 hours in interviews with his biography. Very different man. In many ways, a beautiful man, despite whatever differences you might have with him. The other thing is this: don't get confused about the Kgalema Motlanthe biography if you've read it, because I absolutely am very critical when it's necessary in that book about the ANC and the SCCP. So I draw a distinction between my appraisal of Kgalema Motlanthe as a person, as a politician, which I do, from the glaring weaknesses of and failures of the ANC, which is in that book. So I'm not too sure, how valid the question is in terms of the way in which I've tried to explain it now, when you say that I sang the praises of Motlanthe, but is now apparently so scathingly critical of Zuma, and that you see a contradiction in that. There's no contradiction whatsoever. Zuma has had problems from the very outset, even when he was MEC, I think, for economic affairs in KZN, etc. Corruption. Now go and look at Ronnie Castrol's book on Zuma. This thing is stretching right into exile, Trevor Ngwane. There were shenanigans and problems with Zuma. Ronnie Castrol traces right back to exile days, indicating the inference drawn from his views, indicating the potential even for the kind of things that he did when the ANC came to power in this country. And go and read him. When he does and discusses the Faustian Castrols. But I don't see, the contradiction, certainly as glaring as you're suggesting, between my appraisal of Kgalema Motlanthe and Zuma.
Okay. So, since you so harsh and, dissecting the ANC, how has it responded? Have you had any response from the top ANC guys? Are they happy? Obviously, they are not. There's a joke, let me tell you a joke.
Yeah.
After Polokwane, about 5 or 10 years after Polokwane, it depends how much one wants to exert. So some top ANC guys had some problems. So they said, let's go to Thabo Mbeki, maybe he might help us. And then one ANC guy said, no, don't go to Thabo. He's still angry. So how angry is the ANC with you?
No, Trevor, I don't have, okay, I'm going to do something now. I'm going to go public about something because I'm so fed up with him that, I know Trevor Manuel even before the UDF was formed in 1983. He used to come to my flat in Coronation Road, the very place that you were referring to earlier, before so I know him. And
who's that?
So we were in touch, with this and that, and he knows I've got very serious difference with him. But he removed me from WhatsApp as soon as the book came out,
Ooh.
Yeah, gone. Trevor Manuel.
Trevor Manuel.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Trevor
Removed me
Manuel.
from WhatsApp. Now I look at that, and I've been in touch with Motlanthe. Trevor. I've got quite a good relationship with him, better than any. In fact, the whole of the ANC put together. And we've spoken, and not a word about the book, criticizing it, and he bought the book very soon. In fact, it was ordered even before it was published. He already ordered it. I'm not saying that he's necessarily happy with the book or whatever, but not a word. We've spoken about many things, and but that's how he is. That's how he. What Kgalema Motlanthe will do with the book. Let me tell you what he'll do. He'll say, Ebrahim, there I completely agree with you, but there I've got a problem. How did you arrive at that? And then you'll have a constructive conversation, Trevor, that will take you somewhere. I can tell you now, I can't do that easily with Mbeki or any other leaders of the ANC. It's why I said many times, honestly, I wish that he had won Mangaung. I think policy-wise, he may still have been stricken by this neoliberal policy framework of the ANC. But I think we would have had a different situation. Kgalema's connected, he knows how to deal with workers, the trade unions, etc. I just think we would have had a much better presidency under Kgalema Motlanthe than look at the disaster that has occurred with Zuma winning Mangaung.
Yeah. So let's get, because actually, one aspect of the book I enjoyed. Okay, it's nice to read, but I felt that I learned something new about race, and you argue there that, people take racism for granted. You say, you even dropped out of the social media because people quarrel and squabble, but it's clear that they can't even distinguish between racism and racialism. So let's go back to my question, because you really call a spade there. So you say, the African people, firstly, you use that definition of black, the Steve Biko definition. Yeah. Black includes coloreds, Indians, Africans, but you distinguish it, and you are also against that categorization. But now, when you say that, the African people don't understand race, you just now said that they keep on voting Zuma into power in the ANC. Somewhere you say it's because of boundary education, you say of cultural deficits. And then also someone once said to you, hey, I remember we discussed it. What is so special about colored people? You want them to be mollycoddled. So just talk about that politics, because what I like is that you just call a spade a spade. Everyone tiptoes around race, tribalism, yeah, please just expand on that.
Thank you for putting that question, because partly had a discussion with Colin Bundy, the editor of this book. No, I'm going to repeat and be even more emphatic about what I said in that book. Trevor, you have to sit down and think very carefully without sentiments around race and ethnicity and the realities. You see, knowledge, skills, epistemology, to use the academic term, it's racialized. Our entire global history, Trevor Ngwane, is racialized. Who is behind all the scientific, for the past 5 centuries, whites have been ravaging, they control the world with an iron fist.
Oh, whites.
Now the question, I need to answer you. Trevor, you've got to understand one thing. You've got to be able to deal with why the ANC's return to power. There's no apology to be made when you refer to the devastating consequences of Bantu education, when you refer to the very high rates of illiteracy, underdevelopment, lack of consciousness. Kgalema Motlanthe talked all the time. And this is I'm happy you posed that, and I want to stay with this matter for a while. He kept on telling me when I did this, you know what, We need political education in the ANC, the branches, the ordinary members. It's terrible. Where does it come from? Trevor, this is a huge question. Zakes Mda said I worked in libraries. Let me tell you something. The country south of the Sahara does not come from a tradition and a history of literacy. It was oral history there. This is, Zakes Mda said on Facebook a couple of weeks ago, Black people don't read books. This is Zakes Mda. There was a debate 2-3 years ago, the same thing featured on Facebook. The question of reading is critical, Trevor. Forget about higher degrees and formal, all this stuff. Reading is critical. I believe, and I don't want to go into it now, there are links between that deeper history and the fact that, you know, I worked in the libraries, and I can tell you, even when their libraries existed in townships, people hardly read. And when they did, and it's not just African people, but it's particularly there, I'll tell you what, many of the salient truths of this country, it's racialized. You know why? Because of the fact that the so-called African, and I say African because I've dealt with this thing too, this is a lot of nonsense going around about who's African and who's not African. It's rubbish. Everybody born in this country, you know, whether 300 years before, are African people, south of Africa. That's why South Africa, I don't want to go there, but the demographics of this country, Trevor, you got to go and ask yourself, why did the Minister of Basic Education reduce the passing levels over to increase the numbers of people, of pupils, so-called African pupils who would pass? Standards were lowered. You got to ask yourself why, what is going on there, Trevor? Let me tell you, I come from the trade unions. I used to complain to organizers and shop stewards in my POW who would never even encourage their children to read. Were hardly interested in books and literature. Maybe it's because my life has been surrounded by it. But Trevor, we have got serious. I don't want to go into now when you talk about social cultural issues. There are deep issues, and some of them I raise. In the book I raise, Trevor, let's sit on vaccination. Let me talk quickly to you about vaccines. What did the weekend papers tell you about teachers? It's crazy, man, Trevor. It's because of that backwardness and lack of education and culture, Trevor. You know what? Thousands of teachers, and I can assure you now, they are so-called African teachers, refuses to take the vaccine. They're not taking the vaccine. You see? You see? Okay. Because they've got their suspicions and beliefs and a whole lot of ancestral issues and stuff, Trevor. We don't want to, you see, this is why I said at the outset of the book, the last thing I'm going to do is to be, in that sense, politically correct. And that's why I had to dig into these issues, because there are many truths that people are too afraid to speak, Trevor.
Yeah, yeah. That's why it's refreshing. Yeah, yeah. Okay, let's talk about something.
Look at this film, The Wound. Look what happened with The Wound. Trevor, this is crazy, man. Look what Stan Kinnico and the movies had to do with The Wound. They got threats. They had to cancel shows because there were people who said they're not going to take this film. Because, I mean, and a very educational, good film, Trevor.
Yeah.
Oh. Because of the reaction. Trevor, what is it? Let me tell you what, a backwardness of people who threatened, who did not want this, the wound to be shown. I can give you many examples, Trevor.
Okay, okay, yeah. Yeah, it's okay, it's okay. I did see the movie.
These are the truths we must deal with, Trevor.
Yeah, okay, Ibrahim. I did see the movie Ineba, and I found it very, you know, educational and very, I mean, amazing, actually. So I understand where you're coming from. But let's talk about the ANC then, because somehow you imply that the ANC either not addressed, you know, that ignorance or that cultural backwardness or whatever, or they are taking advantage of it. So just talk a bit about that, including the problems faced by the ANC today. So we're going to move to Nkandla and those issues. Yeah.
Trevor, I'll tell you, since I've discussed this thing at length with Motlanthe, from the 1997 Stellenbosch conference, the ANC, honestly, it's just a mess, Trevor. They've been talking of renewal from 1997. This is 24 years ago, Trevor. And ironically, the more they spoke of renewal, the greater the distance between the leadership and the followers and members were evident. Corruption came, deeper problems, deeper crisis in the ANC on the back of a repeated commitment to renewal. So what does that tell you? How is it possible that they can have conferences and press declarations and January 8 statements, commitment to renewal, and instead the situation gets worse and worse in the ANC? But I'll tell you, there's an area that you know well, that you've worked in. If there is something, but it's going to be very difficult for the ANC to pull it off, and indeed to engineer a renewal of the party. It's in the worst state now ever. Let me tell you, never since, okay, let's say it came to power in 1994. It's the worst multifaceted crisis at the moment. Part of the reason for that crisis is the crisis in the townships. And once again, the so-called African townships are the very worst of, Trevor. You know what's you can't believe it when you walk through the townships, what is happening. It's like a bloody bomb has gone off. The potholes have turned into craters in many parts of the townships, even in suburbia, even in white suburbia. I had to drive through to Motlanthe the other day for something. I couldn't believe it. Houghton, where the Zulek is, go and see the state of the roads there. And the state of the roads infrastructurally tells you a lot about a place or a country and what is happening. But Trevor, if the ANC could have turned around basic services in the townships, it indeed could have, engineered some renewal. It could have did better at the polls, etc. But let me tell you why this is going to be a huge battle, it is unlikely to happen, Trevor. That's why Joburg Water and City Power exists. These are arm's length utilities, which is formed as a result of the 2000 Municipal Systems Act and the Structures Act. Under apartheid, it was departments. There was your water department, electricity department. They corporatized, commercialized, and commodified basic services in the township, Trevor. That is the root of the problem for the explosions and the unstoppable township protests from June 2004. Now, do you know, in order to do that, Mashaba, let me tell you, emailed me, I've still got it. Do you know what he wanted to do? He never got to do it. He wanted to annul all the utilities, bring it back into the city, because there's a link between the tenders, these commercialized companies, and corruption. And he hadn't seen it, but he failed to do it, where there was resistance from the ANC or whoever. But that is what Mashaba wanted to do. Trevor, you will have to annul the Municipal Systems Act to do away with Joburg Water and City Power and all these corporatized entities who are there to make profits besides providing services. And if it's not profitable, there you see prepaid water meters, prepaid electricity meters, which was not installed, Trevor. I studied this. They were imposed brutally. You know what they did in Piri? They pulled in the army to complete the installation because people were ripping out the prepaid meters from the ground. So, Trevor, that is where I think the ANC, if it was committed, but just look at what it's going to involve. The Municipal Systems Act will have to be annulled and repealed and changed. And that is the root problems, Trevor. And if you don't have water, sanitation, electricity, I mean, I'm not even talking now about the unemployment crisis. You know, the housing issue is related to water, sanitation, electricity. But those 4 issues, Trevor, if the ANC could have had a fundamental change of mind, but it would mean that these companies have to collapse, that the city has to take back, and as it would be with all other municipalities, do away with these corporatized utilities and take those services back into the city and be responsible for this. And I can tell you now, you'll see a significant decline in cases of corruption.
Yeah. So before we, in a minute, we'll turn to the Q&A from the audience. But now, you know, tell me, with Zuma going to court, maybe going to jail, I was even thinking that, you know, you might take your book when he goes to jail, you know, because to read list. You know, is there any hope now? Because it looks like the ANC is really being torn apart, and I can't see how he will duck going to jail. But you never know. This is South Africa. This is the ANC. What is your thinking there? Because that's where everyone's mind is on. And what is your advice, your take, your assessment?
Well, Trevor, let me tell you the Zuma matter now and what happened in Kandla. And I mean, it's shocking because, you know, Cyril, the president, should have made a statement, in fact, Sunday night, Monday, to say this is crazy. What was allowed? They broke all the regulation rules around the COVID thing, traffic. I mean, it was a total mess. Never has any event, incidents happened which pointed to what is called a banana republic. How it's just incredible, Trevor, what happened. And it's certainly going to deepen the crisis. You can see Aish and other people were also there to give him support. Trevor, this RET is a lie. Zuma and his faction, this RET, he's never had any sympathy or seriousness about radical economic policy. It is the EFF that began, it's after the EFF's talks, radical talks about economic freedom, etc., that this thing emerges, the RET emerges in the ANC, but not so much to steal the thunder of the EFF, but to create a factionalist pole of attraction in the ANC itself, vis-a-vis the more overtly neoliberal Ramaphosa clique, ruling clique. That is it. Your Pravin Gordhan and all those people. But indeed, the irony is that this RET faction, most of the allegations of corruption, if you study it, it's linked to people in the RET camp, Trevor. This is the interesting thing here. The people who are pushing for radical economic transformation are the very people who have been fingered seriously, some in court and so on, with allegations of corruption. But I'm afraid to say, you know, and I don't want to sound unduly pessimistic, we are in the worst situation right now, Trevor, ever in post-apartheid South Africa. And no doubt something the ANC never had control over, the emergence of COVID. But everything they have done regarding COVID has been a disaster. Trevor, there's been too many critiques in the newspapers every day. They have messed up, so not that they have not tried, you know, to assuage the hardships caused by COVID, by the grants, etc., you know. But now I want to ask you something. You think there's no connection between the incompetence, how they've handled COVID, and the questions that you earlier addressed? The 1992 Ready to Govern was an absolute unmitigated lie, a deception. Even Motante could say, but what did this mean, ready to govern? Just look at what's happening. Trevor, to deal with COVID, you need scientific knowledge, advice consistently. The ANC never had it, and even some of the good brains and advice, they removed. The Minister of Health removed, Trevor. Now, you know, this is to me linked up with the question of today to rule, to be a government, you need to have scientists, man. You need to have all the data education, knowledge about these things. These are very complex things to rule today, especially in this very globalized world now and with the impact of COVID. The ANC, I've argued in the book, has lacked the skills, knowledge, and understanding of the, not only South African history, about the issues that it faces now, including COVID. I mean, scientists, how many people have come out to, you know, heavily criticize the ANC and Ramaphosa for their handling of COVID? You think that just comes out of the blue? I mean, you think it just comes out of the blue, Trevor? No.
Okay.
No, it's related to the issues I raised in the book, Trevor. It can't just happen.
Yeah.
You know?
So, yeah,
okay.
no, I get it. So, so to the audience, so the chat box, I think, should be a debate among the audience, which is nice. I see some comments, some people saying they like the way the author is forthright, addressing the issues. And also someone says they agree with the characterization of the political consciousness of Africans, even though the younger generation is much more Black conscious, etc. So please have that discussion. I will deal with the Q&A. So if you have a direct question, put it in the Q&A, but please also discuss among yourselves and put your opinions. So let's start with the question of gender. So God says, good afternoon, congratulations on the book, which provides a class and race analysis. Yet again, gender has not been considered other than a few inserts. If we think about gender defined as power relations between men and women, what legacy has the ANC constructed for gender relations in South Africa? Okay, yeah, please answer that.
No, Trevor, you know, in fact, the original title of the book was Race, Class, and Gender Under ANC Rule. Mm-hmm. But I'm telling you now what happened. Bundy was correct, the editor, to draw to my attention. He said that I had lots of material on the race class issues. But he felt there wasn't enough on gender. There's a lot of things in the gender. If you've read the book properly, there's a lot, but there's certainly, I could have did much better on what is a crucial matter, especially if you look at what has happened in South Africa over the past 10 to 15 years, and especially with so-called African women who are still at the bottom of the pile, Trevor, since it was under apartheid. It's worse, in fact. The people who struggle most in this country are African women in the townships. So I think that there should have been more about gender in the book, but I certainly do deal with it. I even refer to, I think there's a heading of the silence of gender in history. I go into that, but I will certainly make no argument with anybody who says that, you know, we could have had much more around gender in the book.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you do.
So because of Bundy's thing, because of Bundy, sorry, Trevor, yeah. Then he suggested to me, I didn't totally agree with him, but I decided, I accepted it. He said that we must omit gender from the title. I'm being honest, that's how it happened. And so I left gender out, yeah, from the title.
No, so it's fair enough, and it's a fair question, but I did come across, you know, yeah, you're dealing with gender, and in fact, you even argue that ANC has really failed on the gender question. So that question was from Dr. Michelle Regers, not from Gatlibert. So there's two questions which are related. Ebrahim, what do you think was the role of the wealthy 1% in the world? The Rothschilds, the Koch brothers, Ford and Mellon Foundation, USAID, etc., during the struggle in recruiting their future foot soldiers in South Africa. So the 1% recruited their future foot soldiers in South Africa. The Rothschilds have some prominent struggle stalwarts as the face of their organizations. Arundhati Roy says in her writing that they identified their candidates all over the world, while these candidates are still throwing stones. And then Sikribo says, what must be done to transform our economy? You know, I saw something where apparently Zuma said, hey, you guys, when we came out, you know, Mandela got a house from Oppenheimer. I don't know whoever was helped by Rupert. Me, I was not helped by anyone. So do you want to comment on those questions, please?
You know, Trevor, I think, you know, the Rothschilds is a huge issue, you know, globally and financially, you know, the leading family around global finance dating back to centuries, etc. And, you know, Trevor Manuel is now one of the key. It's very interesting how what has happened in South Africa. UDF leader, you know, is now one of the key consultants of Rothschilds in Rosebank, you know. But what you need to do to concretize the question of you see, Trevor, this Joel Nchattenze and other people want to tell us, don't talk about white monopoly capital, just talk about monopoly capital. They don't know what they're talking about at all. They're saying that for political reasons. They struck a deal with the white elite, you know, etc. It is white monopoly capital. I mean, Harvey found it laughable for anybody to question the relevancy and saliency of white monopoly capital. But what you should do instead is to look to the South African version of the Rothschilds and what has happened there and how they impacted on the deal with the ANC. That is, you know, the Oppenheimer family, Anglo-American, etc. And you can see, if you look at the Johannesburg, the white monopoly capital still dominates the economy till today. But Trevor, you got to take your hat off. These people are very clever. What they did in this country, and that's why I say, I must tell you, I requested an interview with Trevor Manuel, who I know well. He flatly refused an interview. I said, Trevor, I want to talk to you about what happened in the 1990s. Everybody is now pointing to what, because of the depth of this crisis, how did it happen? So we had to go to the foundations of the new South Africa. And so I thought this guy was an important guy. He said, Ebrahim, I'm not going there. He insulted me and a lot of things. And I never got to interview Trevor Manuel. But Trevor, what they did, that is why I speak about British intelligence. The cleverest, smartest bourgeoisie that ever in this world, you know, is the British bourgeoisie. You see what they did in Zimbabwe, what they did in South, they played a big role in South Africa behind. Britain and the United States was key in the settlement. They pushed, that's why you can see sanctions were applied from the United States also. They pushed for this thing, but all the advice given to these people, de Klerk and all of them, was to give you what you call political democracy. They're too clever, Trevor. White people are very clever. They've been at it for centuries. So they have an accumulated knowledge of how to control, divide, oppress, and exploit people. And even with new systems, Zimbabwe and then South Africa. Trevor, how can poverty be as bad as it is today? How can we have the most unequal society in the world? I mean, you don't need to be a political social, you just need to read the newspapers and have average intelligence to see we were hoodwinked. We were hoodwinked by the settlement, and Mandela, to be honest with you, I did a critique of him in the Mail and Guardian when he was virtually untouchable. In 1999, after Sipho Seyepe and Howard Barrell interviewed him in Houghton, I did a piece. And I pointed fingers at Mandela when he was untouchable. Mandela bore a lot of responsibility, Trevor. That's why Malema and then went for him, and the youth, including the African radical youth today, are rethinking the legacy correctly of Mandela and the whole lot of them, you know, Trevor. You know, you have to, you could say it's pragmatism perhaps, but you have to judge whatever is done by the results that it brings. Just look at where we are today. In many respects, bloody worse than it was under the apartheid regime, especially basic services, which I study in the townships. So, you know, they played their cards very smart, and they were not at Kempton Park. But you know what, Trevor? They were strategically miles ahead of Kempton Park regarding the key questions of the economy and control, etc. They fend off all talk of nationalization. They got the ANC to compromise on the Freedom Charter, on the RDP, the office was closed. These things didn't just happen in a vacuum. You know, GARE comes up 2 months after the RDP office is closed in June 1996, Trevor. I believe the hand of white monopoly capital was behind a lot of these moves with the ANC leadership.
Okay, yeah, so let's just briefly, because you've covered this ground, but you know, I have to be faithful to the questions. So there's two related questions. One says from Lirato, has Ebrahim ever been a member of the ANC? And then the other says, yeah, I agree that the township is in crisis. You know, for example, in Pietermaritzburg, especially in rural township schools, there are no educators. And then lastly, what is Ebrahim's view on the impact of destructive historical competition for leadership in the ANC? Why does the quality of leadership seem to be sliding down? So just be brief on that, because I'd like us to end off on a note of the way forward, you know, what you think. Thanks.
Well, Trevor, you know, I mean, you know, let me tell you very quickly what people don't know. Although in one article I did for IDASA, you know, that's now shut down, I, for the first time, disclosed publicly, and I won't mind saying it again, I was a member of the ANC, but the Marxist workers' tendency of the ANC, the people who were expelled unconstitutionally by the ANC in 1979 and finally expelled in Kabwe in 1985. So, you know, I had a bit of a history in that respect, you know, but you know, the other question you're asking about ANC leadership, and it's always been there. This study of mine took me deep into that world, Trevor. There's always been, and often, let me tell you, subdued, hidden, camouflaged, tribal, factionalist divisions and competition in the ANC. You know, it's been there all along. You can see even around Zuma, and okay, historically the ANC leadership has been Xhosa in the Eastern Cape and so on, but there's always been ethnic, tribal tensions in the ANC, which they've tried to suppress, you know, especially in what is supposed to be a non-racial South Africa after 1994. But, you know, for me, those are big and serious issues, but nothing for me is as important, Trevor, as getting to the root of why the townships are in this incredible and unprecedented crisis. Because we can talk as much as we want to. At the end of the day, people need water, sanitation, food, electricity, housing. Those are the key things. And that is why, Trevor, in the book even, I address race now and racism in relation to those issues. We've reached the stage now, there's hundreds of books, thousands maybe, on race and racism over the decades. Trevor, you can spin this thing endlessly, let me tell you, race and the discussion of it. You have to concretize race. That is what I've learned. You have to concretize it around the basic needs and interests of people and the question of social, and perhaps because of this deep crisis in global capitalism, social, and not just social, but a socialist transformation that we probably require, which will address what is happening in the townships, collapse all these private utilities, one foot in the private sector. Just look at the SOEs. They also work with that framework, Trevor. The SOEs, it's the same thing: corporatization, commercialization, kind of commodification. They work on a profit basis. So the ANC needs a fundamental rethink, which, as I've said, is hardly likely to occur for a long time to come, you know.
Yeah. So now we got some questions from Facebook, questions in the chat box, you know, about the ANC having dwindling votes, but Zondo Commission is dealing with it, is not addressing these concerns. What do you think? And then sometimes there's legislation, but it's not properly implemented. and a few other things. You know, I can't cover everything. Someone on the scientific theory of germ theory. Let me ask, Ebrahim Harvey, what's to be done?
You know, Trevor, I lost you now. You broke.
What is to be done?
Yeah, no, I say when you were speaking, you broke up. I never heard that. Let me tell you, that's the problem. I never heard it clearly because you broke up.
Okay. I just answered the question, what is to be done? What is to be done? You've got 2 or 3 minutes.
With the current crisis, you mean?
Yeah, what is the way forward? You know,
yeah, well, I indicated the way forward, Trevor, really in terms of, I mean, the people who have suffered most is the majority Black working class in the townships, the very historical support base of the ANC, you know. They've never experienced a new South Africa, Trevor, you know, and that is why we're the protest capital of the world. So that should take you to the townships. If you want to talk about changing the situation and people's lives for the better, raising living standards, you have to go there. This is the field I study, and I'll tell you something, it's the thing closest to people's hearts. And that's precisely why the unstoppable township protest from June 2004. It's to deal with water, sanitation, housing. You know, Trevor, I mean, it's so terrible. Schools are without water and electricity, sanitation, you know, it's an indescribable mess. And I mean, it's easy for me to say it, you know, the ANC is so far removed from the mindset that would make the kind of changes I'm proposing. They caught up in their own factionalist battles. It's ugly. Look what happened in Kandla. When we've seen for the first time a very worrying sign of a warrior-inspired Zulu nationalism at work like we've never seen in post-apartheid South Africa. That's what we've seen in running on this historical thing of Zulu warrior people and, you know, the most warrior group of people in this country, and you don't mess with them. And, you know, we all know that, Trevor. That's what you've seen in, just look at the manner in which they conducted themselves. They rode roughshod over all regulations, everything. I think I've done a piece on it for some paper. I hope it's carried this week on Nkandla. But Trevor, Nkandla is a very serious moment, really. And I just hope that the right things are done. You know, I can't see Zuma getting off, to be honest with you. And I don't think the Friday judgment is going to, it's hardly likely that you will have a high court disrupting and overturning the decision of the apex of the judicial system, which is the Constitutional Court. It's very unlikely. But,
so we might be in for a hard time, for a difficult time.
Yeah, I can't see the Zuma avoiding a prison sentence, and he's his own worst enemy in that regard. Go and study the issues. He had so many, he treated them with contempt, he dismissed them. They made so many appeals to him to come forward. How can you do that consistently? And that's why, in fact, they reached that ruling. They went through everything, Trevor, his conduct, and that's how they reached that ruling. I mean, what is wrong with this man? I mean, he was the president of this country. He appointed the Zondo Commission of Inquiry. He appointed, look at that irony. It's a brutal irony. Then the commission calls him to, and he should have had the most exemplary conduct in relation to the Zondo Commission of Inquiry because he instituted it. And look what he did, Trevor. So you know, if there's something coming for him in terms of really, he's asked for it, you know.
It's going down. So, Ebrahim, look, you've done very well. You know, this book, I think it's a must read for anyone interested in understanding what's going on in our society today and also understanding what's going on inside the ANC. But most importantly for me, figuring out the question of race and class, because race is an issue which apparently many people can't get their heads around and understand. So thank you to everyone. Thanks to the Wits School of Governance. Thanks for all the comments. One of two of them we couldn't address, but you know, it's due to time. But the book is available, I think, at Chikane. If you look at the chat box, yes, say something.
Sorry, the last word, Trevor, and I said it only because something came up about a question that Ebrahim is wrong about why the African people continue to vote for the ANC. No, I have never said it. And if you read the book, you'll see it. I've never said that it's only through, you know, lack of education or literacy or things like that, or political education. No, let me tell you what is a key thing why the worker class globally and historically will continue to vote. The ANC is a traditional organization of the working class in South Africa. Until and unless a mass-based alternative to the current ruling party appears to provide another pole of attraction and a way forward, reluctantly, workers will continue to vote for the party in power, because I suppose they're very realistic in their own way. And that has been part of the problem. So it's not just illiteracy, lack of education and all this. There are multiplicity of factors, but I think the lack of an alternative for workers to vote for a working class program is one of the major factors, I think, why the ANC continues to get the votes of Black people, you know. Yeah, okay.
I agree with you there, and I think we build that organizational alternative, different politics. So thank you very much. Thanks, Ebrahim. Well done. People, please go and buy the book. There's a link in the chat box where you can get the book from, but you can also get it from Chikane. So well done, Ebrahim. Thanks to everyone. Thanks to West Government School. And Baba is the end of
Thanks,
our
Trevor.
session.
Thank you, Trevor. Thanks very much, man. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Liratu. Yeah.
Thank you, Liratu. Thanks.